Welcome back to the channel. In this video we'll be looking at polymorphic lookups, what they are, when to use them, and how to create them. So let's get started. Right, so what are polymorphic lookups? Polymorphic lookups in Dataverse allow you to relate a single record, such as case, to multiple different types of entities, so types of tables, without having to create separate lookup columns. So this provides a flexible, clean, and ideal situation for scenarios where relationships can span across records. Now, a prime example is the regarding field on an activity record. So when you look up in the regarding field, it says 4 types of records. So if we look at that, you can actually select records of type account, case, contacts, and knowledge articles. And this is an example of a polymorphic lookup. Okay, so let's look at a potentially common scenario where you've got a case record in customer service, you've got a case type, and out of the box you get question, problem, and request. Now, let's assume that you're dealing with multiple request types throughout your organization, and for each of those request types, they might have, or you might have, a bespoke set of data points that you need to capture. You wouldn't want to put them all on the case entity because that wouldn't make sense and isn't always that scalable. So you want a way of being able to capture that information on a separate table linked to the case record. So essentially every request type having its own table that can capture specific data for it. So in this scenario, we would create a new lookup on the case entity and turn it into a polymorphic lookup and have that lookup pointing at more than one table. So what does that look like? Let's jump into the Maker portal. We're on the case entity now. First of all, let's create a table. Let's go new tables. Let's use Copilot to try and help us with this. Start with Copilot, and I'll just say okay, create a request type table with a column for request type name and 3 records in it: waste, graffiti, and roads. So I'm just going with a 311 scenario here, if you're familiar with that, basically a local government and the different type of request types that citizens might call in with. So now that Copilot's taken my request, let's have a little look. Request type name, that's the primary key, primary name column. I think we're happy with that. Obviously, if we wanted to create additional columns, we could add that in here or change them. I'm happy with that for now, a very straightforward scenario. Save and exit is fine. Okay, now one thing I was interested to look at is, does Copilot understand the context of me being in a solution? And it looks like yes it does, which is awesome. So I'm in my environment, and just one thing to call out, obviously best practice, you want to make sure you're in an unmanaged solution and you've got a publisher set up. And so the fact that I created that table from within this solution, as you'd expect, I can now see the request type table. So if I select that, let's see if we've got any records in there. Okay, cool. So it's actually added a few more, but that's absolutely fine. The reason I'm doing this as a separate table with records is because I think this would be a more scalable solution than using a choice field. You obviously could use a choice field. It doesn't really matter. Just in my case here, I've decided to go with a lookup rather than a choice field itself. So anyway, now we've got the request type table, we've got records in there. That's all we needed. Now we need to just switch back to the case table. And in here, I'm going to create a new lookup field. New column. I'm going to call it request type. I'd normally give it a description, but for this, we'll just run through it quickly. Select a lookup. Let's do a quick search for request type. Here it is. Save that. Now you'll have a request type field that is a lookup to the request type table, and in there the user will be able to select the type of request type it is. You'll also need to create a lookup which is the actual polymorphic lookup field. Okay, so at this point we've actually reached a bit of an issue. I don't have the tables, the multiple tables that I want to connect into here. So I need to create those first. So let's say we're going to create 3 tables, and they're going to represent the roads, waste and graffiti additional data. So let's just go back and do that. And then I'll show you how we turn that lookup field into a polymorphic lookup. Okay, so I'm just asking it to create 3 tables: waste additional data, roads additional data, and graffiti additional data. So the case entity can hold that common data that you collect for each of the cases, and then those additional data tables will be collecting data specific to that request type. So that all looks good to me. Let's do save and exit, that's fine. And that'll take a little minute for that to refresh. Okay, so next let's look at how we turn a lookup into a polymorphic lookup. Okay, so now we're in XRM Toolbox. There's only a couple of ways I know of setting a lookup field to be a polymorphic lookup. One is through code, which is definitely not for me, but the other way is by coming into XRM Toolbox and finding Polymorphic Lookup Manager. So thank you to the authors for this, as this makes everyone's life much easier. So I'd already set up a connection. We're connected here to my sandbox. Okay, so let's find the case, which is actually incident in Dataverse. So let's find that. So I'm just going to say create new polymorphic lookup. Lookup display name is going to be, I can't remember what I said before, but other request type data. And then in here, I'm going to say what the different tables are that I want to reference. For the incident or case, I want to create a new polymorphic lookup called other request type data, and I want to be able to link or select from graffiti, roads and waste additional data tables. So here I'll just click create polymorphic lookup. I haven't chosen a solution. Custom config. Okay, let's try that again. If we look at the case table, we've got other request type data. Now, what we want to do is add those lookups to the form so we can have a look at what that looks like in the UI. Okay, so we'll look at the enhanced full case form. Okay, and under type we'll just add request type. You could add a business rule that says if the type is service request, then display request type field, but we're not going to do that just for this example. Okay, let's save and publish that, and we'll see what it looks like in Copilot Service Workspace. Okay, so now we're in a case in Copilot Service Workspace. We're on the enhanced full case form. Here we can see we've got a case. We can select the type, so request is already selected. In here we can find the type that we want, so let's choose graffiti, and then other request type data. So at the moment you would have to create new, and then you select a record type to create. So we'll say graffiti additional data. Okay, and here we just have a form for additional data for graffiti. Now, for this demo, we didn't add any additional columns, but you would obviously build this out with the additional columns that you want to capture information specific to the graffiti service request. Likewise, you'd probably change it for roads, and you'd probably change it for waste as well. Now, this works fine, but it is manual at the moment. But that is the way to create a polymorphic lookup. So now this other request type data is a polymorphic lookup field, which is pretty awesome. Now, what you'd probably want to do to go one further is to basically have some kind of flow or plugin running in the background that says, when I choose my request type, depending on which one you choose, it automatically creates a record in the corresponding table and then links it into this case. So for example, if I choose graffiti, I save the record, that fires in the background, I get a new record created in the graffiti additional data table. That is then populated here, and then as a caseworker I don't have to worry about all of those manual steps. I can just continue to work through it. That's all I wanted to cover today. Hopefully you got some use out of that. Hopefully it's been valuable. If you enjoyed it, if it has helped, give the video a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, help support me, really appreciate it, and see you in the next video.